To actually have a chat a bit about some of these stories that we've heard, and I don't want to sort of bore you with my story. As Guy said, you know, I hadn't been here very long. I think I'd been in the office for 6 days in total and hadn't actually been inducted into Parliament. So it was a bit of a struggle to get through, but the cooperation that I got from people on the ground in terms of helping us was really amazing. One of the things that I think really came home to me as being an elected official was that I knew that I had to act for my community, not just for my family. I was lucky I only had my daughter there with me. Robert and our son were in Kokoda doing the trail for Anzac Day. So it was just the two of us, and I know that that was that drive to not worry about us. We just ate or drank or slept when we could, but you went out, you went to evacuation centres and just saw how other people were going, and that's something that I know that you do very well. I was a bit lucky than the Thornton RFS, who came home to their cars underwater and their headquarters in fact underwater, and I was still struggling with that. But I just had that little glimpse of that's what you guys are dealing with every day. In those first couple of days, people like Guy, the Leader of the Opposition, Luke Foley, my other parliamentary colleagues were all very helpful to me and supportive and gave me those little bits of information. In fact, Kate Washington from Port Stephens and myself called very early on for a state of a natural disaster to be called, because we could see that this would have impacts, and our colleagues let us know that we needed to get that state of emergency or that natural disaster zone called to be able to activate all of the help that was required for our communities. And I was pleased, so pleased, that the Premier and the Minister for Emergency Services agreed to take that important step, because that then enabled us to release resources from the state and the local governments. And then Kate and I again really pushed for that Category C funding and were able to get supported by Guy to get that. And it was really exciting for me yesterday when I had a letter come into my office from someone who lost fencing and lots of other damage to her farm, not covered by insurance, had actually been able to access that funding, and the cheques just in the mail coming through to her. So that's a really important thing, because our community isn't just suburbs and city, it's also rural aspects, and that those people really suffered in this drought, and particularly people who never, not this drought, it's this flood, and particularly people who've never suffered before. Over 400 people contacted my office during the storm, wanted assistance or information. We did enormous things, and I have to pay tribute to my staff, Gina and Jordan and Lisa. You know, it's still going on every day, and my daughter Jessica, you know, answering phones, giving people a cup of tea who haven't had power for 6 days, helping alert electricity providers that people hadn't had power for 6 days because there were areas that kind of got knocked out. And you know yourselves that some of those 13100 numbers weren't working, so we were able to get in contact with you when all other means were failing, and it was just such a large emergency in terms of the communications failure that it was really important to work together across all levels of government, across all parties, across everything, so that we could help people in need. As someone who's worked in the bus industry in the last 17 years, I've got a bit of a background in critical incident management, not that on the ground that you've got, but I've contributed to manuals within our community. I've been to Apex Summit on the Gold Coast, where they did training for tourism operators on how to prepare for emergencies. And speaking to council officers from Queensland at a regional summit in Dubbo the other week, it really highlighted to me how we need to look at preparing our community. We think it's sometimes easier for our community to just put all this behind us and move on and forget about it and write it off as a 1 in a 100 year event. And it's easier for the community to push to one side their fears of a natural disaster and refuse to do their own emergency plans. And I've been really excited when I've seen people like the Thornton RFS who work right near where I live, doing emergency plans last summer on fires, and I know the SCS have got some great flood-safe materials out there, and you're all working to try and get the community to prepare, but it doesn't always happen like that. And so one of my jobs as a Member of Parliament will be to really try and encourage more of those community plans to be activated, and to also encourage community resilience building. Because if we looked at what happened in Gilliston Heights, which became Gilliston or Gilligan Island, as we said, their problem was in accessing a community because they were also spread out and they haven't had to build those relationships that you've been building in your different brigades and services over the last 20, 30, 40 years. As volunteers get harder to get hold of, and everyone in our community is so busy, we place ourselves and our communities at risk, I think, if we don't do these plans and if we don't practice how these plans will play out. We need to have those resilient communities and plans which really acknowledge the geography that we live in and the climate that is changing. And that's why I'm working with that community at Killiston Heights to build a new community organisation for them, to working with farmers at Miller's Forest who've been dealing with this all of their lives. So to try and share that community information around so that people who've lived with this are able to meet with our new people. Because we can't forget that there's about 73,000 people in Maitland, and 17 years ago when I moved here there was about 50,000. So if we look at the people who've passed away, the people who've moved away, probably half our community really has no understanding of floods and storms and the impact they'll have on us. These storms are having ongoing impacts for everyone in our community, and everyone in this room lives that reality every day, and it's what you prepare for in your professional or your volunteer life, and our community really thanks you for that. And that's what these awards are at the heart of them. That's what it's all about, because in a situation like we experienced in April, there are so many heroes. You are all heroes. It's hard to single out individuals, and I wouldn't even like to try because I know I'd forget too many people or I wouldn't even know, because so many of you are silent heroes and you just get on and do it. But it's also even more important, and that's what this is all about, to acknowledge that in the end it was your excellence in working as a team and working as teams within teams, with people you didn't know, with people from all over Australia, from people with other organisations that have quite different ways of operating, that all got pulled together and it saved lives on so many occasions. These awards are for everyone in our local emergency services, and I thank you for being here tonight to accept them. And I want you to know how much we as a community value your contribution, and we thank you for all of your efforts, not just in the times of emergency, but every week when you go and do your training and all the things that you do in between training, the time you spend away from your families. We thank you for that. We admire you for your selflessness in putting your community before yourselves and your families. So thank you very much. And what I might do is I'll get Guy to come up again, and we're going to just basically call out these awards. And so we'll call out, and if one person or you all want to